So people are like, since 2008, the Fed has been printing money, QE1, QE2, QE3, QE infinity. The Bank of Japan has been doing it for 24 years now. And basically the whole world's doing it, just printing money. Why are these central banks having to print money? And that's because we have Techno Feudalism. What does that mean? That means we have the real economy, people making transactions, buying and stuff. And then we have the Techno Feudalists. Those are the monopolies that they're not monopolies in the sense of they own, like Standard Oil, they own the oil wells or whatever, they own the railways. These guys own the markets. Each one owns its own market. Amazon owns the retail. No one can touch them. They don't pay any tax. They have very cheap methods of selling. They are untouchable. They have such high barriers to entry. No one can break in. They are beyond a monopoly. And then they charge 40% for essentially doing nothing. You have to take on the risk. If you're a seller on Amazon, you take the risk of selling. If it doesn't sell, you have to take the risk. You actually have to pay for them to get your stuff back, actually. So you take on the risk. They just provide the platform, and then they take 40%. A rent, essentially. They're not making profit on selling something. They don't have to make an effort selling something. They make rent, right? That is feudalism. Feudalism is the Lord sits in his manor and he has people sitting there and he collects rents. Doesn't have to do anything. Passive income. That's what Amazon is. That's also what Google is. 90% of advertising, online advertising, is through Google. You cannot get anywhere without paying them money and paying them huge amounts of money to get on that first list. Amazon as well, to get on that first page, you have to pay a huge amount of money as well. So it's not just they take 40%, you also have to pay them in order to get the visibility. So huge monopolists own their own markets, search engine and everything. Microsoft is the software, the cloud, Microsoft Teams, obviously the software on our computers, huge monopoly there. And then you've got FB, the social media and WhatsApp, which also has an Instagram, and they have that also the advertising there, and they control that. So you've got these techno feudalists, and they suck out from the real economy a lot of money, and they don't put it back in. They take that money. Now, normally what happened was, let's say a railway monopoly back in the day, they would have to pay their workers. They also have to pay corporation tax. They have to pay for fixing the rolling stock, fixing the line, things like that. The money went back in. These guys don't employ anyone. They don't need to employ anyone. Everyone else is employed. Uber, for instance, only has a very small team. They don't own the taxis. They don't own the taxi drivers. They have a very small workforce. Right? And so they are not employing anyone. Their money isn't going back in. The money, those extra rentier profits that they make, doesn't go back into the system. It's just sucked out. And then they buy, either they do share buybacks, they buy their own stock to inflate the value, or they buy real estate, or they buy actual assets, anything art, things like that. And that's what inflates those values. Pricing people now, it wouldn't even matter stocks or those assets, but real estate is a real problem because then it stops people being able to buy, stops being able to get married, and then causes depopulation because people can't have kids unless in marriage. So therefore you have depopulation, which is rapidly increasing. So with all this, the Fed has to keep printing money. That's why we have had all this QE. That's why it will not stop. And that is why they're going to keep we're going to get to the point of UBI, universal basic income. Eventually will have to be put in place, because if there's no money in the system, everything collapses. That's a liquidity crisis, right? Which is what we had in 2008. People don't trust, there's no enough money to go around. These people keep sucking the money out. Do you get it? They keep sucking the money, they hoover, they just suck all the money out. So there's no money in the system. So therefore, people can't pay back debt. If you can't pay back debt, the bank collapses. Then the one bank collapses, every bank collapses. So that's why we're constantly seeing new ways of pumping money into the system. The US has done the RRP, which is being drawn down, and by then the Q1 will be finished. And so they started the BTFP, which is the banking transactions, a special fund for banks basically to allow them to borrow money and not let the public know that they've basically taken money from the Fed. Essentially, the Fed prints it, gives it to the banks to back them up because there's no money in the system. There's no money to back them up. So they have to do this. And it will keep getting worse because as the baby boomers retire, they pull money out of the system because they take their stocks and their 401ks, they cash them in and they want the cash. And when you do that, you're again sucking money out of the system. And when you suck money out of the system, someone has to put it back in. And so that's why, and we used to have the euro dollar market, which was actual savings of dollars outside America being re-lent and re-leveraged like 1,000 times. So therefore, on $1, you would build $100, right? Essentially printing money. But that blew up in 2008 because no one knows what's out there in the euro dollar market. No one knows what you're getting. So that's essentially blown up. And so therefore the Fed has had to step in since then all the time and keep printing money, keep printing dollars, and it will never stop. That creates inflation, that destroys your living, that inflates asset prices, that makes them richer, that destroys the real economy further because they're not helping solve the problem. The problem is these need to be killed. They need to be stopped. They need to be killed, right? They're worse than any monopoly in the history of man. Techno Feudalists, rentiers, lords that own their slaves. That is what they are. China has their same version of this. Thank God they separated, so it's actually really good there. They're not tied to this, so the whole world does have actually two opportunities. But these guys are, no one has ever seen so much concentrated power in so few companies that employ so few people. And until they're stopped sucking from the real economy, this won't stop, inflation won't stop, people won't stop getting poorer, and assets won't stop getting more expensive.